Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be taking a look at the debut EP from Troye Sivan, titled TRXYE. Okay, in case most of you who are new here haven't really gotten the message, I don't tend to cover EPs. I like looking at fully formed albums that have definitive presence or a theme behind them, which even shallow dance pop and even country albums they can't effectively deliver. So you can't just say that it's all the most highbrow indie stuff. And on that note, I tend to be a little bit cautious when covering fellow YouTubers as well. I've talked about this way back when I reviewed Carmen's major label debut album, because YouTube is a bit of a smaller community than you might think that it is, and there's always the chance that whatever I review will probably get back to the artist in question. Now, the conclusion that I ultimately drew was that, well, I'm still a critic, and it doesn't matter what platform to which they started on, they deserve the same level of criticism as any other act, and to soften my typical harsh reviewing style would be a disservice to Troye Sivan, because the implication would be, should I go easy on him thanks to the fact that he's on YouTube like me, or because it's an EP, or because he's 19, that I don't feel his art can stand in the big leagues. And you know what, that's not fair to him. And considering so many of you recommended this guy, I figured what the hell, I'd do my due diligence and at least take a look. So, Troye Sivan, Australian, does a lot of acting and theater work, and a prominent YouTuber who's built a pretty impressive platform over here. He's got his major breakthrough with one of his songs featuring the hit romance movie of this year, The Fault in Our Stars, based on a novel written by author John Green and fellow YouTuber. Now, I haven't seen that movie, mostly thanks to that particular brand of cancer drama tends to gun for a certain type of sentimentality that just, I don't tend to like it. But I did hear Troye Sivan's charting single on the lower end of the Billboard Hot 100, Happy Little Pill. And honestly, I wasn't exactly impressed by it. But you know, I kept getting so many requests for this EP that I figured there had to be something that was gripping everybody, and I made sure to dig down and give it plenty of listens. What'd I get? Honestly, I got very little from this album. In fact, if I'm being impressively blunt, this album went in one year and out the other because it felt incredibly inert and flat to me. It's an album gunning for sentiments and trying to tug on my heartstrings at some points, and man alive, I gotta say, it fell flat in its face. I'm not even saying that this EP is bad, but it's certainly not exceptional or interesting or good or something that I haven't heard in modern pop or indie pop over the past couple of years. I've heard this before. In other words, this album's nothing new or special to me. But even if I hadn't heard a dozen other acts using a very similar formula, I gotta think I probably wouldn't like this album all that much. So okay, let's start with Troye Sivan himself, and I'll give him this. He's not a bad singer at all. He doesn't sing with a lot of energy or real power, but his brand of mid-tempo presence isn't bad. In fact, it's perfectly adequate for the brand of desensitized, borderline sterile pop music that he delivers on this album. Take Happy Little Pill. He delivers the disaffected, blissed out, Lana Del Rey-esque vibe reasonably well, but it rapidly becomes apparent it's only one of two modes that he has on this record, and it's not a mode that I just find all that interesting. It doesn't help matters that he never really stretches himself outside of this range, or shows a lot of real passion and investment in his material, at least coming through in his vocal delivery. And as I've said time and time again, if the artist doesn't want to show that he cares about his music, why should I? Granted, his other mode is very quiet and earnest, and I guess if you fall into the right demographic, it's got a certain charm to it, and I can appreciate that, but it's also a range that I don't find all that special or unique. I've heard this sort of thing before. Now, granted, the instrumentation and production don't help, but if you want a prime example of everything I don't like in modern indie pop music, it would be here. Sure, the percussion production is pretty decent, but the melody lines, they feel very submerged and drowned out in reverb, and honestly, not all that interesting when you manage to pull them out. I'll admit the reverb is better applied than on some modern pop music, giving Sivan's vocals a lot of presence and intimacy in the mix, but the few moments where we get a melody, the synth tones sound oily and shrill, the mix very claustrophobic and somehow overloaded with extraneous effects that don't help the overall feel of the song. Take Touch, one of the more straightforward love songs and probably one of the better songs on this EP, but then the synth line wobbles out into the middle of the chorus and absolutely kills the momentum for me. Or take Gasoline. No song that anchors its chorus in the symbolism of fire should have instrumentation this watery and painfully weak. It's no surprise that The Fault in Our Stars, it's the best song on this album, given its more earnest presentation, the placement of the piano towards more the front of the mix, but even that piano melody is still anchored in your stereotypical 4 chords of pop music, and I gotta be honest, it's not exactly interesting. Sure, it's earnest and I can appreciate that, but beyond that, there's not much there. But okay, what about the lyrics? Well, what about them? If I'm going to stretch for a theme of this EP, it's in trying to get through life despite broken promises and shattered illusions of what life might be, either in the fun of shallow partying or the machismo of war, or even in the face of one's own lies or encroaching loss of death. Now, it's not a bad theme at all, and I will say that the overall very heavy instrumental tone of this record does fit with that theme. But on a technical level, the songwriting is amateurish. The painfully weak rhyme schemes of fun, hell, across this entire album, the complete lack of interesting metaphors or symbolism. There's the fact that this album really isn't saying all that much that hasn't been done better this year. Happy Little Pill is basically See a Chandelier minus the drama, the stakes, and the desperation that made that song remotely compelling. And Fun goes for a very basic war is hell statement that would be absolutely revolutionary if I hadn't heard most of Linkin Park's last record, The Hunting Party, or Pharoah Monch's PTSD, which was excellent, or any modern war movie ever. And Gasoline honestly could have worked. It's a song where the narrator cheated and is torn up about it and he's begging for some form of forgiveness and cleansing, but he never actually says what he did even after he said he would tell it at the end of the first verse. The metaphor in the chorus implies a cleansing fire of the heart, some very real passion, but putting aside the fact that there's nothing in the delivery or instrumentation that earns that metaphor, I gotta be honest, the delivery doesn't really sell it on me either, especially after his really petulant behavior in the second verse, not answering the call. It's a lot of real petulant whining there. I didn't like it. The Fault in Our Stars is probably the best written song on this record, but then again, it's a song that relies on the film and the book for its emotional pathos, and even for some of its imagery, like that oxygen tank line in the first verse, a line that does not make sense if you haven't read the book. And truly good art should be able to stand up on its own. And really honestly, that song does not set enough of a scene to really fly, because in the end, this EP feels very broadly sketched, silently lodged in his teenage origin, and that doesn't really impress me anymore. At this point, this brand of dour, reverb-saturated pop music, it's played out, and it tries to lend this album a lot of drama that it really doesn't earn. And part of it is Troye Sivan himself. As a performer, he never really seems to push himself. And while his disaffection might work for a couple songs, the rest of this EP is so thin that I've got nothing to really grip me here. For me, this EP is a 5 out of 10 and only barely a recommendation. An EP is supposed to grip you and make you feel eager for that upcoming album, and TRXYE by Troye Sivan, if anything, did the exact opposite. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I can imagine this is not the review you guys all wanted of this EP, but hey, you asked for this. If there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.
Against yourself.